Hey, kia ora. Welcome to Genealogy and History May 2nd. Yes, it is. Man, can you believe we're already in May, of all places to be? We are in May, and it is May the 2nd, and we are going to be taking a glimpse at events that happened in history. We're going to be starting in 1194 and ending in 2005. I think it's 2005. I'm not sure. I can't read the number I wrote. Let me have a quick squiz. Nope, actually 2008. My apologies. I wrote down the wrong year. Didn't think that looked right. Okay, now that I've made amendments to my notes. Okay, so we're going to be going from 1194 to 2008. There's a lot of stuff that happened around May 2nd, and some very interesting things that happened as well. And I was reading deeper into some of these events that happened, and I was sort of like, wow, I never knew that that happened, or Some of them made you go, and some of them were like, say what? But anyway, let's have a look and see. And the question we're going to ask you, as we always do, and let us know in the comments below, is do you have anyone in your family tree who participated or witnessed any of the events that took place on March 2nd in history that we will be revealing today, and any other people that we mention, are they in your family tree? And if you need help starting your family tree research, or you're not sure where to go next to look for information, please feel free to go to helenconnects.com and set up a time for us to have a free consultation. So maybe we can help you in that hour to free up that blockage that you're having, or help you at least get started on your family tree research. Okay, so here we go. Are we ready to dive into May 2nd? I know I am, because I know what's coming. 1194, King Richard I of England, otherwise known as Richard the Lionheart, gives Portsmouth its first royal charter. And I thought, okay, I've always known charters to be like, if you charter a ship, you're chartering the entire ship. And I'm like, what the heck is a royal charter? So I did go and look it up, because I wanted to be informed. Okay, so a royal charter is issued, according to the Privy Council office in England. Royal charters are granted by sovereign on the advice of the Privy Council, and they have a history dating back to the 13th century. Well, we know they go back a little longer than that, but their original purpose was to create a public or private corporation, including towns and cities. So if you see the name of a town that has incorporated, this is what they're talking about, and to define their privileges and purposes. And so that's what they would do. And there was things like, back then it allowed the towns that were given their royal charter the ability to have an annual market festival thing, the ability to have like weekly what we know is like farmers markets or flea markets, to have those sorts of things. And in some cases, when the royal charter was issued, it meant that the people no longer had to pay tax to the sovereign. So that was a big deal to get that. And also, to anybody that gets a royal charter, they can say that they have a royal charter, and that kind of like lifts the perspective of their business up. In 1497. John Cabo expedition departs Bristol on his ship, the Matthew, searching for new lands across the Atlantic. He is the first European to land on North America continent since the Vikings. And he reached the coast of what is thought to be Newfoundland in June of 1498. So it took him over a year to get there, but he got there. But yeah, so John Cabot was the first European to land on North America since the Vikings. I gotta go back to when the Vikings landed. I might have some Viking. According to my last DNA testing thingy-mabob, the Vikings have appeared again. There's rumors that on my dad's paternal side of the family that we have connections to Vikings. And when I first did the DNA test, they had Scandinavia in there. And then the latest with the DNA testing the results will change over time based on more samples that they get, the better the technology and all of that. And in the latest change, I actually have Norwegian and Swedish ancestry. I was like, yes, the Vikings are back. Woohoo! Anyway, enough about that. 1536, May 2nd, 1536 is when Anne Boleyn was arrested and taken to the Tower of London. She was the second wife of Henry VIII. And if you remember back, like about a week or so ago, we were talking about Oliver Cromwell, who is the one that was behind creating all of this, all of these charges for Anne Boleyn, even though she was innocent of them. He made it that she was guilty of all of them. I don't know, you gotta watch some of these people, I tell you. Remember, just be very careful of who you trust. In 1670, King Charles II gives a royal charter to the Hudson Bay Company. So think of that. So there's two royal charters that were issued on this day, one in 1194 and one in 1670. In 1780, William Herschel discovers the first binary star, Z Ursa Majors, and it also says that in 1781, not the same day, but in the year 1781, he discovered the planet Uranus, which was the first planet to be discovered since the antiquity. And what's the antiquity? I went back, it's like ancient times. I'm like, okay. It didn't tell me, I couldn't find what years into antiquity was. It was just ancient times. I'm like, perfect. So yeah, it comes back to this thing about how could they see this stuff? When I got to go back and see who invented the telescopes. They could go see this stuff. I mean, yesterday, yeah, the Chinese and the Egyptians reported seeing that supernova in a constellation, and I'm like, how? What did you use to see? Let's see where I'm up to. 1783, so March 2nd, 1783, architect Pierre-Charles L'Enfant is promoted by brevet to Major of Engineer in the recognition of his service to American liberty. He is best known for designing the layout of the streets of Washington, D.C. And if you remember, across the road from the White House, there is L'Enfant Plaza, which is named after him. In 1865, U.S. President... Oh, yes, I did get this around the right way. In 1865, U.S. President Andrew Jackson offers a $100,000 reward for the capture of Jefferson Davis. And I thought, okay, $100,000 in 1865, what's that worth today? Just over $1.6 million. So that's a lot for a reward. In 1878, the US stops minting the 20-cent coin. So I never knew the US had 20-cent pieces. Well, they did up until 1878. They stopped minting them after that. In 1885, the magazine Good Housekeeping was first published. So that one's been around a little bit. In 1857, Hannibal Goodwin patents the celluloid photographic film, which was used in Thomas Edison's kinetoscope. So I had to read my handwriting. Which, if you remember, the kinetoscope is with moving pictures. And we talked about that one like a week or two ago. In 1905, French newspapers published a list of Jules Verne's unpublished works. That was on May 2nd, 1905, and he had actually passed on the 24th of March, 1905. In 1908, the song Take Me Out to the Ball Game was registered for copyright. Isn't that the song that is sung between, like, after the 7th inning or before the 7th innings in a baseball game? I remember going to a couple and having to sing some song. Is that the one? I think that's the one. Oh, jeepers, I'm molten. Let's see. In 1918, General Motors acquires the Chevrolet Motor Company of Delaware. And I thought, well, cars hadn't been around that long and you're already acquiring each other. And this one here was sort of like, it's one of these ones I wasn't sure whether to put in or not, but, it's a major thing and all this. So 1927, the U.S. Supreme Court's Buck versus Bell permits forced sterilizations of various unfits by state authorities where such surgeries are practiced for eugenic reasons. And I'm like, okay, what the heck is all of this Bell versus Buck thing? And I thought, I'm probably going to find a whole slew of like legal mumbo jumbo that I don't understand or anything like that. Yeah, no, that wasn't the case. I found a very short summary, which helped me understand it just a little bit. And I know people are going to get upset about this, but you also have to remember the time that this was, the resources they had available to them at the time. So when you're looking back at a history and you see things like this come up, you have to look at what were the circumstances at the time? what technology did they have around? What resources did they have around? What had they learned by that point? What did they learn later on that would have helped that And I keep thinking, I think, with how we're dealing with this global pause right now, in 200-300 years, when you've got our descendants looking back at this time, what are they going to think about how we handle things? What are they going to think about that? Are they going to think that, man, that was such a stupid decision, and get all mad and angry about it like we do about some historical events that took place? So remember, think about the times that they were in, the technology that they had at the time, the information they had available at the time, and what information that followed later that could have helped them in that situation, which they didn't have available at that time. So in summary, Buck versus Bell was decided on May 2nd, 1927. The U.S. Supreme Court, by a vote of 8-1, affirmed the constitutionality of Virginia's law allowing state-enforced sterilization. After being raised by foster parents and allegedly raped by their nephew, the appellant, Carrie Buck, was deemed feeble-minded and promiscuous. In 1924, Buck was committed to the Virginia State Colony for epileptics and feeble-minded near Lynchburg, and there ordered sterilized. The Virginia law allowing the procedure had been passed in 1924 and responded to 50 years of scholarly debate over whether certain social problems, including shiftlessness, poverty, and prostitution, were inherited and ultimately could be eliminated through selective sterilization. Looking to test, and we're going to come back to that in, where do we come back to it? We're going to come back to that in the very next event we're going to be looking at. Looking to test the law's legality before engaging in widespread sterilization, the colony superintendent, Albert S. Priddy, made sure his order was appealed. The Amherst County Circuit Court and the Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals both ruled in the colony's favor, and in 1927 the U.S. Supreme Court agreed. In an infamous opinion, Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. noted that Carrie Buck, her mother, and her daughter were all suspected of being feeble-minded, declaring 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. The opinion was never overturned and led to a marked increase in sterilizations across the United States. At the Nuremberg Trials, Nazi defendants cited Buck versus Bell in their own defense. Virginia repealed the law in 1974 and in 2002 apologized to its victims. And I looked at that and I thought, we really have to be conscious of what we are doing and how it's going to affect the future. Because, that was done in 1927, and the Nuremberg trials took place decades later, and the Nazis were defending themselves based on a Buck versus Bell as their own defense. And I'm sort of like, whoa. But the fact that Virginia took until 1974 to repeal the law, and then it took them till 2002, so you're talking almost another 30 years to apologize to its victims, most who probably weren't alive at the time. I'm just sort of like, sometimes, it just, the human nature and things just baffles me at times. It just does. But, remember the times that they were in, remember the resources that they had and what was available to them, and the stuff that they've learned since then. Enough for them to repeal it, but it took them a long time to apologize. So, yeah. So now we're going to move, and I suddenly thought, if they do this selective sterilization, who for future generations are they killing? Because there are a lot of famous people. If you go back and you read different biographies and autobiographies and stuff, there are a lot of people who are either heroes from war, who are famous politicians, famous actors, directors, all of that, all these sorts of famous people that we tend to look up to and everything else. And most of them came from very humble beginnings, from poverty. And that was one of the things they thought that they could eliminate with the sterilization things, and prostitution, which happens to lead directly into 1929, when Eleanora Fagan, at the age of 14, and her mother were arrested for prostitution following a raid of a brothel in Harlem. And Eleanora later became known as the jazz musician Billie Holiday. Makes you think, doesn't it? Okay, so this was 2 years after they passed that law, but to think that had times been a little different and things been a lot, the timing of things had it been a little different, but it makes you wonder, out of all those sterilizations that they did do, how many people, how many inventors, scientists, mathematicians were did not come into existence because of that. So that kind of just sort of like woke me up to sort of like, we've got to be careful about some of the things we do and how it later affects our history. So just a little food for thought. In 1932, Jack Benny's first radio show premiered on NBC Blue Network. In 1938, American singer Ella Fitzgerald records a Tasket with Chuck Webb and his orchestra. I'm loving this because I'm getting yesterday we had Aretha Franklin, today we've got Billie Holiday and Ella Fitzgerald. Great singers. I love their music. And actually, if you go and type in a Tasket with Ella Fitzgerald into YouTube, there's actually a really cool little snippet from the film where she sang the song, and I don't know what the name of the film is. But it was very cute to sit there and watch it. 1946, the Battle of Alcatraz takes place, killing 2 guards and 3 inmates. It's like the Battle of Alcatraz? So I went and had a look at that one too, so I could give you a little more information. But the Battle of Alcatraz there was about half a dozen inmates who decided they were going to escape, and they overpowered their guards, got keys, got their guns, and they got fed up with the locked doors, and so they just started shooting. And it wasn't until the U.S. Marines came in and with grenades and rifle fire and stuff, they were able to shoot. But it was a 48-hour siege. And at the end of it, they had 2 guards and 3 inmates who were dead at the end of it. And there was numerous injuries and that. But there was the Battle of Alcatraz, and it became known as the Battle of Alcatraz. And 3 of the 6, so 3 inmates were killed. The 3 that survived happened to escape Alcatraz, but then they never found their bodies. They never found them again. So they're not even sure if they actually escaped Alcatraz or if the currents in the San Francisco washed them out to sea. You never know. In 1949, Arthur Miller wins the Pulitzer Prize for Death of a Salesman. Let's see, 1952, the first scheduled jet airliner passenger service began with a BOAC Comet, and it's a type of plane. Looks actually pretty cool because it was that shiny metal stuff. It wasn't covered in paint, it was just shiny metal. In 1955, Tennessee Williams was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Is that a movie? I think I've seen that movie. I'm trying to remember who was in it. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. I have seen that movie. Pretty sure I have. Anyway, 1956, the U.S. lab detects high-temperature microwave radiation from Venus. I'm like, how'd they do that? I mean, there's things, the technology we have then, you kind of sort of know about the technology they had back then. It's sort of like, how did they manage that? But they did. In 1969, the British liner Queen Elizabeth II leaves Southampton on her maiden voyage to New York. And if I remember correctly, that one has been retired and I believe is in Dubai now, or somewhere in the United Emirates. And I think it's been turned into a hotel. And there is now another QE2 that is sailing. You've got the Queen Victoria, the Queen Mary, and the Queen Elizabeth. I believe they all have 2s after their names. And that's with Cunard. In 1988, Jackson Pollock's painting Search sold for $4.8 million. And he was an artist who died in 1956 at the age of 44 in a car accident. This is a huge historical thingy. And we've got 2 left. So we've got this one, which is a huge one, and then one more. So in 1990, sheep isn't going backwards in times now. So I remember all of this happening. I was living in New Zealand at the time, and I was in the Air Force, and I remember all of this happening. So in 1990, South Africa and African National Congress opens talks to end apartheid negotiations and the negotiations went from May 4th, 1990 to April 27th, 1994. And on April 27th in 1994, and I don't know why it wasn't mentioned on April 27th when we were doing that day in history, and I went back and it was just this little single line, and amongst all these other things that were like 2-3 lines, so it was just a little line that I missed. So we're going to tell you about it now. On April 27, 1994, millions of South Africans, both black and white, were able to vote in the first multiracial elections held in South Africa since apartheid began in 1948. And the result of that election was that Nelson Mandela was voted in as president. And for the Marvel fans, in 2008, the first film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Iron Man, was released. So, and there's been a lot of movies since then. I'm trying to find a good watching order for those. So that's what happened on May 2nd in history. So was anybody in your family tree associated to any of those events, whether they witnessed them or participated in them? Are any of the people that we mentioned in the events that took place, any of the people that we mentioned, are they in your family tree? Need to know more, want to find more, want to discover those secrets that your family is hiding from you, or those little rumors, those little stories that come out, and you will go, are they true? Just go to helensconnect.com and set up a time for us to have a chat, and we can see what we can help you unveil, whether it's starting your own tree, helping you get over some stumbling blocks, or helping you discover secrets and rumors within your family and whether or not they are true. Whatever you want to talk about genealogy, I'm happy to talk about. So that's it from us for today for May 2nd. We will see you tomorrow for May 3rd. Hei konera.